Now, for whatever that happened to Alibaba in 2021, I think it will be timely for us to revisit the start of this entire crackdown, which essentially banished Alibaba's share price for life. So I think until today, I think a ton of people still believe that it was Jack Ma's fault for this initiation of a crackdown on big tech. Of course, because I have vested interests, my views might be biased. But let me just try to construct the entire timeline of what happened in the last 15 months or so to provide a better perspective with numbers and of course the different data points. So it will also help a lot if you help me banish the like button to help boost my ego. If not, let's get started with that fateful day, October 24th, 2020, where Jack Ma criticized the financial supervision system in front of all the top financial leaders and referred to the base accords as a club for the elderly and stated that these regulations should not apply to China, and also criticized traditional banks for operating with a pawn shop mentality. Shortly after, Ant Group's $37 billion IPO was suspended on the 3rd of November 2020. This essentially took the media by a storm, where everyone was providing 24/7 coverage surrounding both the company and the country and how China is going crazy again. Everyone was able to shape the narrative however they like. Jack Ma thought he was above the CCP. CCP does not condone arrogant businessmen. China is a backward country. You name it, we have it. So it doesn't stop there, by the way. They even went ahead to deconstruct this entire saga as Chairman Xi having a personal vendetta against Jack Ma because of some political history with the previous administration, which is the opposing faction to the current administration. So, to cut the long story short, China is just a crazy country with all these infightings. Really makes me wonder, under all these dramas, how did the country still function? This remains a myth until today. Anyway, I think Netflix should recruit all these people, might be able to push out even more blockbusters. So behind all these theories, there are always small kernels of truth, which makes all these different narratives much more believable. My job here is not to convince you whether the theory is right or wrong. I just want to provide you with some context surrounding the entire development and kerfuffle. So I know political rivalry sounds much more interesting, but just some quick Google search and watching some YouTube videos on Jack Ma will let you have a deeper appreciation of what kind of person Jack Ma is and what exactly is he kind of thinking about from time to time. And if you were to really appreciate how he got to where he is today, it's probably not because of his sheer intelligence. It was probably quite evident in the discussion between Jack Ma and Elon Musk what kind of person Jack is. So many people have always praised Jack Ma on his EQ, which is emotional quotient, and his ability to employ talents and to use them. Don't take it from me, take it from the countless remarks from people close to him and they have worked closely with him before. That said, just a thought experiment. Do you think someone like Jack Ma will not know of the ramifications and repercussions of his comments and speech to his company and the pending IPO? So you be your own judge. Conversely, it might be exactly because he knows of the problematic regulatory entanglement Ant Group will be in and has gotten whiff of the entire situation prior to the IPO. Hence, it was a desperate attempt to call out to the regulators to rethink. Okay, enough of all these different conspiracy theories. Let's talk about why the crackdown was needed. First, if you were to scour through the official statements of the regulators, it essentially just revolves around one theme and one theme only. It was basically echoing that Ant Group was encouraging a dangerous accumulation of systemic financial risks, creating the conditions for a repeat of the same sort of subprime credit crisis. So those are of course some really bold statements, but if you have to put yourself in the shoes of the regulators, I don't think it's a very hard conclusion to come by. So the first arm of Ant's business is the facilitation of transaction, where it acts like a platform between consumers and merchants and also a peer-to-peer transfer. So you must be wondering, how big can Alipay be, right? China has 1/6 of USA's GDP per capita. The Chinese people probably don't even know how to use all these different fintech apps or fintech platform. So now, if you were to look in terms of annual payment transaction facilitated back in 2020, both Visa and MasterCard are MNCs. multinational corporation. And they both happen to be the two biggest players in the world, mind you. It's the entire world. One Ant Group facilitated the same dollar value in transactions of both Visa and Master. And Alipay only makes up 50% of the mobile payment industry in China. 50%. That's why I have been emphasizing umpteenth amount of times that China makes the world looks like a child, and this trend will probably not reverse anytime soon. That said though, both Visa and MasterCard charges an obscene amount of commission ranging from 1 to 3% just to facilitate the transaction, while Alipay only charge a measly 0.05%. Is this a good or bad thing? We can talk about it in another video, but that is how they're currently operating. So after understanding the scale and importance of Alipay in China's entire financial system, introducing the second arm of Ant Group, which is Huapay and Jiepay, who are the major supplier of credits for the layman. So Huapay, if I translate it, just means just spend, and Jiepay means just borrow. And both of these platforms essentially encourages consumerism, or the hot lingo would be buy now, pay later. At June of 2020, the outstanding loans via Ant Group stood at a whopping $312 billion, at which 80% were individuals and only 2% were funded by Ant Group's own money, 80% being individuals, 2% funded by Ant Group themselves. The Dodd-Frank Act, after the 08 financial crisis, requires securitizers to retain at least 5% of the credit risk. But evidently, Ant Group managed to skirt the requirements due to the immaturity of China's financial system. Increasingly though, you can observe that the consumer credit business becomes the dominant share of how Ant drives their revenue, and funding just 2% sounds like a deal dropped from heaven, and it sounds too good to be true. Until now, if you still think that Ant Group is a small player in a big financial ecosystem and Ant's practices are sustainable, congratulations, you are a true capitalist with only one goal in mind, which is to drive profits at all costs. That said, whether is it sustainable or not, we don't really know. Investing in China, however, is about long-termism, if it even is a word. So it is definitely a concern on how sustainable these business practices are in our current financial system, and is it taking too much of a toll? So at the peak of the crackdown, Alibaba was issued with a 2.8 billion anti-monopoly fine. So it was the biggest out of all the different tech companies thus far, on the 9th of April 2021. So the quantum of this fine might be affected by Jack Ma's speech, but who exactly knows, right? It's not transparent that way. This fine was mainly to address the exploitation of market dominance on Alibaba's e-commerce front. Later that month, Ant Group was also ordered to restructure on the 13th of April to essentially allow for better government oversights. Many theories was that they wanted to break Ant Group up, or essentially just break Alibaba up, and inject state-backed firm partnerships so that the government would have more control over all the different businesses. Whatever it is, sometimes investing into a Chinese company is like investing into a black box. You don't really know what they are exactly doing because the business is so complicated and quite convoluted, but people plow in money anyway. Not trying to throw shade on any other company, but Ant was probably one of such company, and this breakup might actually bring more clarity and benefit potential investors, with the government included of course. So in early September, regulators actually ordered Ant Group to split the business of Alipay from their lending business, and they want the credit business to be split into an independent app as well. So Ant's internal credit scoring arm was essentially their competitive advantage, because China do not have a robust central credit scoring system. So unlike other major economies out there where you have the credit bureau or whatever the equivalent is, which really allowed Ant Group to leverage on their so-called algorithm when transacting with the different banks. So in November 2021, PBOC gave the green light to the new credit scoring joint venture between Ant and Zhejiang Tourism Investment Group, which will both hold 35% in this new venture called Qiantang Credit Rating. Later in December, Cinder Asset Management, which is also another state-owned enterprise, pledged to buy 20% of Ant's consumer credit unit with $930 million as part of the expansion of the capital base of Chongqing Ant, while Ant on the other hand will hold 50% of this new subsidiary. After all these new injections of state involvement, investors were once again excited for the potential Ant IPO. So the Ant IPO speculation was dashed again because just recently, Cinda Asset Management withdrew from the deal due to prudent commercial considerations. Essentially, they probably don't have enough money or are just a little tight-strapped with their liquidity, especially when China is also experiencing some sort of crunch in the financial sector. Hence, Chongqing Ant will probably have to find a new acquirer and restart the entire approval process again. Next, the impending headwind of the digital yuan or the e-renminbi, which was widely discussed throughout 2021, remains an extremely hot topic as a disruptor to the mobile payments market. So just a disclaimer by the way, I'm not an expert in this space and I'm still doing my research to strengthen my understanding specific to this industry. That said, I've came across many conflicting sources and quote-unquote evidence that tells the exact opposite story of each other. So for people that have deep knowledge in this sector, please do drop me a DM or drop me an email because I would like to find out more. There are currently 10 pilot cities where it has handed out digital yuan amounts as part of an Ang Pao campaign. And in light of Winter Olympics, visitors at the venues in these capitals will be able to use e-renminbi without having to open a local bank account or even have the mobile payment app. It also seems like the digital yuan can be spent through other payment apps as well, such as Alipay and WeChat Pay. Can be spent, by the way. Officials have also made similar statements regarding the digital yuan, that its sole purpose is to embrace innovation and not snatch the lunch of the current players in this space. Believable or not, I'll leave it up to you to decide, but it also takes time for us to see whether is there real competition. Lastly, Ant is also currently involved with a corruption scandal involving the former party secretary of Hangzhou, and corruption is deeply frowned upon, even though it might probably not even have substantial impact and it doesn't even affect the business at all. Especially so when Hangzhou is like the homecoming for Alibaba. As an avid observer of how everything has panned out in the crackdown thus far, just 3 simple lessons I distilled for your own reference. 1. If you want to invest in Chinese companies, look for businesses that are able to create real long-term value for its stakeholders, especially the Chinese people. 2. You probably can run, but you can't hide. The regulators are far superior than you can think of. 3. It helps if you can appreciate and look from the eyes of the regulators and role-play the government rather than just listening to everything at face value, especially when the narrative is shaped by people or a group of people with vested interests. So these are just the developments surrounding Ant Group thus far, and I'll see you in the next video. But more importantly, I'll see you on the moon. Goodbye!